Prepare your wallets, friendos, because video games are getting more expensive. Probably. Let's break it down. Okay, so everybody's on the hype train for the PlayStation 5, the Xbox One Series X, or both. All aboard the 7:30 hype train to Hype Town, making stops at Ray Tracing Village and Expensiveville. Choo-choo! That's right, if you thought you were going to get away with paying $60 per game for another 6 to 8 years, you thought wrong. Here's the deal. Game publisher 2K announced that the MSRP for its next-gen version of NBA 2K21 is going to be $69.99. First off, nice. I see what you did there. But also, that is $10 more than the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One versions. You know what that also is? That's 2 whole Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supremes and some change that I am going to miss out on per game. Am I probably going to live longer by not eating those Crunch Wraps? Yes. Are my arteries going to thank me for not eating those Crunch Wraps? Probably. But it doesn't matter because we're all gonna die someday anyway, and I need some Crunch Wraps. If I do the math, if I buy 20 full price games over the next generation of console life cycle, that's an extra $200 I have to spend. If I buy 50 games at full price, that's an extra $500. The equivalent of just buying a second console. That's a lot of money. Random, but ultimately delicious, tangent aside, that $10 price hike could be a total fluke. 2K could be looking to capitalize on a console launch year by jacking up the price of all of their new releases for that console just to, make a little bit of extra profit. But there is a little bit of historical context that makes a price increase likely and also understandable. Historically, games have hovered around the $60 price point for almost ever. So NES cartridges back in the late 80s and early 90s were $50. And when the N64 came out, they were $70. So $10 each way, similar to what we have now. But generally speaking, we have all been used to that $60 price point because it has been around for 15 years. 15 years, that's 2 console life cycles. That price point got kind of locked in at around PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 launch timeframe. So that's what you're looking at there. That is a long time to have a price point set when game development budgets have skyrocketed. And speaking of those game development costs, let's talk a little bit of inside baseball. So there was a really interesting interview that VentureBeat did with Sean Layden, who is the former chairman and CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment Worldwide Studios. And he had a lot to say about the cost of games, game development, and game pricing. He maintains that AAA game development prices are completely unsustainable going forward, and that every console lifecycle, the estimate is that the cost of making a giant blockbuster game like your Red Dead Redemptions, your God of Wars, so on and so forth, have doubled every console cycle. So we're looking at a huge increase in the cost of games from those Xbox 360, PS3 days when that original $60 price point was set to now. This past console cycle, Layden estimated that those really big games cost anywhere from $80 to $150 million to make. And that's not including any kind of marketing budget or anything on top of just pure development cost. So now that we've talked inside baseball, what does this mean for you? Because that's what's important here. Well, it could mean a couple of things. One, if the cost of developing those AAA games continues to increase, continues to balloon, and we don't kind of scale back what we're getting from those games, the cost of a game is going to increase for sure. And honestly, I feel like we might even feel a little bit lucky that they didn't increase last console cycle, because those games cost a lot. Or 2, if Sean Layden is right and the cost of making games becomes too unsustainable, we're probably gonna see studios start scaling back some of that feature creep, making shorter, tighter games. So games that are big open world MMOs might have less side quests or less areas to go to. Or we might see multiplayer games like fighting games feature less characters. Or we could see the rise of episodic games, much like Final Fantasy VII Remake. Games that are smaller in scope and scale might seem like a bummer on the surface, but it could also mean that we might see more sequels in a console's life cycle. We may see even more games come from our favorite developers. If they can focus on more than one game every 5 years, like a God of War might take to make, then we just get more games. And honestly, I feel like that's a win for everybody, right? There's also something to be said for lower income households, especially right now, who often get into a console life cycle very, very late because the consoles are cheaper, the games are cheaper, there are a lot more used options available. And locking those kids and adults out of $70 games, or at least making them even more limited in what they can purchase, that sucks. Fortunately, we do have price-conscious services available to us that help us get more bang for our buck, like the excellent Microsoft Game Pass. And also, a lot of these games have online components which extend the shelf life and replayability. All good things. Don't get me wrong, I love spending 100+ hours wandering around in an open world game that has captured my imagination. Who doesn't? But if I had to make the choice, I would rather spend $60 on a really tightly crafted and sharp game experience than pay $70 for a bloated AAA blockbuster. Unfortunately, I'm not the one calling the shots here. It's the game companies that have to decide. And if there's one thing game companies like, much like all companies, it's money. So I guess I won't hold my breath, and I'll start stashing away some of that Crunchwrap money before the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X drop later this year. I'll start saving after this one. Just this one. I promise. Don't judge me. I don't know, you guys. Are you guys willing to pay $70 for a game? Drop it down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss while I eat this. Crunchwrap time. Crunchwrap time. It's the best time. Okay.